Welcome back to the podcast, and it is that time of the year where me and Paul do our National League predictions. It's so difficult to predict the National League. It's difficult to predict any division, but especially this division. So go ahead if you want to have a go at us in the comments and have a few questions about our predictions. What I will say, though, is we're going to justify predictions within the next hour. Our full predictions will be out. Some of them you're going to disagree with. The majority of them, of course, you are going to. So please, if feel free in the comments if you want to have your say on the predictions. You're free to do so in the comments below. But what I will say is we are going to justify our predictions. Yes, you'll probably disagree with a lot of them. But yeah, just go ahead in the comments and give your opinions on that. Also, please remember to like and subscribe. If you are new, I would probably suggest that, I predict that a lot of people will be new to the podcast who are tuning in now. So if you are new and this is the first time you're watching this is the home of National League coverage. Every week, me and Paul, weekly live streams, we do interviews, loads and loads of coverage on the National League. So please consider subscribing to the channel. Before we get into the predictions, Paul, are you looking forward to this?
As always, it's a tough ask, Luke. You know, you sit here spending hours justifying why a certain team could be in a certain position. It's like you said, it's a tough league. And this year, I think with the exposure National League had last year, there's more big names coming into the league. You know, there's probably a bit more money being spent. Some big clubs obviously still knocking about. So yeah, real tough one to decide on who sits where.
I know a lot of people when they're doing the predictions and they always say before, I'm not looking forward to this. For some reason, I've been trying to predict and I've been thinking, you know what, I'm quite looking forward to putting my predictions out there and seeing what people are going to say. Because honestly, if you want to have an argument with me in the comments, I'm going to justify these predictions. I've literally spent hours on end. I think I've done 7 different predictions in the past month or so. And then yesterday I thought, this is going to be my predictions now. There's one club who I put in the relegation zone. I'm now considering putting them in the playoffs. That's how different it's changed over the last week. But so we start then. So we start as we mean to go on. We don't actually know each other's predictions. So we're doing this. We were thinking about it, but we don't know each other's predictions. We'll edit it afterwards. So 24th then. I've gone for Oxford City. Who have you gone for?
I've gone for Oxford City.
Oh, so we've agreed on the first one. That's a good start then, I think, anyway. I'll just quickly say why I went for Oxford. So, of course, Oxford, they're new to the National League. They've never been in this division before. I believe they are part-time. I think they might have gone into a hybrid model now. But this is just my gut feeling, and people may say this is naive of me to say because I don't know enough about them, because I'll be brutally honest, I only saw them in the playoffs and that was it. But it reminds me of a Maidstone who came up last season, a Chorley, a Welling, even a Weymouth to some extent, Hampton, Waterlooville. They just seem to be a very similar club. You know, the business that they've done, Tafari Moore, from what I've seen on paper, that is, he looks like quite an impressive signing at wing back. But there's no one out there there's not enough players, I don't think, that make me think, yep, they're going to give it a real go to survive this season. Of course, Josh Parker was in the Football League with them, but there's just not enough, I don't think, quality. There's been no one that's come in that's really sets the world alight at this level, and I know it's difficult in their position. And in fact, they've lost one of the star players in Lolos, I believe it is, who's gone to Crawley. So I just don't have a good feeling about Oxford City at all, to be honest. I think they could be a club that will come up this season and go straight back down, to be honest. What's your take on them?
No, I mean, I agree. I know a little bit more about Oxford City being down here in the south and having seen them in the last four years ago playing against Wealdstone. But they've had to spend a lot of money. They've relaid their pitch, so they've got a better surface to play on. It wasn't brilliant before. They've had to build or spend some money on infrastructure of the stadium. So that's really probably hampered their playing budget. And like you, Luke, I think there's always an element of surprise, isn't there, with new teams that come up. But if you look at the other teams that have come up, Fylde, who else came up? Ebbsfleet.
Ebbsfleet, yeah.
They've had experience. Kidderminster, they've had experience in the football in the National League before, whereas Oxford City haven't. They're brand new to that level, a bit like Wealdstone were 4 years ago. So there's going to be an element of surprise. They play a good brand of football. Maybe they'll do something like Dorking will, but I think you're right. I think I can see them doing something more like Maidstone have, Welling have in the past. Just not enough quality. They've signed a goalkeeper today, Marcin Brzezowski, who was, I believe, a free agent. Had been on loan to local local step 4, 3, 4, 5 teams from QPR. He's probably going to be his backup from Chris Haig, who's got experience. I just don't see them surviving because I just don't think there's enough depth and enough quality.
Yeah, it's not proven at this level. That's the problem. I know we've been talking about Josh Parker and him, being in the Football League in the past, but he's 32 years of age now, and I can't see him being prolific in this division. And I think for a side like Oxford, they need to have a goal scorer. Otherwise, I think they're going to struggle because I think they're going to leak a lot of goals. And honestly, I don't see them scoring many. I think it could be a case of them starting well and then the league finding them out. And then I think it could turn out to be one of the thumping boys. I'm sure that'll probably end up being wrong by the end of the season, but that's our initial opinions at the moment. So we'll move on to 23rd place then. Who did you go for?
I've put in Southend United.
I've gone for Maidenhead United. So do you want to comment quickly on why you've put Southend there? There's good reason behind that, I would probably suspect.
It's purely on the basis of what have they got? 16 players at present. They can't have 6. They can only have 16 up till the end of August. Personally, having, I think we're all the same. We've all read what's going on. They've only just paid their staff after 3 months. Who's to say that on the 23rd of August is going to drastically change that allows them to get more players in? Yeah, they've got to get another 8 or 9 players potentially on their books from the 23rd of August if they're allowed to. Otherwise, they've got to run with that because that 16 they've got, the 11 outfield players are strong. But there's no two ways about it. They're going to get injuries. They're going to get suspensions. There's going to be tiredness. Yeah, off the back of are they going to get paid? There's so much uncertainty that I just cannot see them not struggling. And then come August, if they don't adhere to the rules that have been put in place by the league, they're going to get a 10-point deduction. And those rules are rules that if the rules were in place previously, would have broken. So who's to say they're not going to do it or potentially do it this time? As much as it pays me, it's a great football club and they've got a great fan base and they should be in the top 6 or 7, not the bottom 4 or 5. But I just can't see them surviving.
Well, I've gone for Maidenhead then. And of course, it's another season where I predict Maidenhead to go down. I think for the past 3 seasons, I've said, Maidenhead, you're going to go down. And I think most people do. And there's a lot of reason behind it. And I think this is one way you can justify it, but you're going to get proven wrong somehow. There'll be some gem in that side that come the end of the season would have got into double figures and will then go on to move on to a better team. And of course, they've got a quality manager as well. But is their time running out the National League? We've got to remember last season, they were the second lowest scorers in the division. They survived by 2 points. They were very, very fortunate that the season finished when it did last season. If it went on any longer, then Torquay probably, in my opinion, would have caught them. Just adding to that as well, them not being good enough, and I think towards the bottom of the table, being stronger this season. Emil Aqua, he scored 13 goals for them last season, and they relied on him for goals quite significantly. If you took his 13 goals away, they would have dropped 15 points last season. And I know when you think of that, you could say, well, other people are going to come in with the goals. But for me, I think they really are going to struggle. Cole Kapekawa, a centre-half. That's a big centre-half that you've lost. Finding a replacement for him. Sam Barrett, of course, wasn't playing throughout the season, but I still think it's quite a big loss. And the players at the side, they're relying on someone called Mitchell Lawson, who I can't really comment on too much, but obviously he's come from the Scottish Championship, and I think he's going to be that Aqua replacement. And you've also got the likes of Lewis Kinsella, who was at Aldershot, did well there, went to Wealdstone, didn't particularly get into the team. So I'm just not too keen on the business, but I don't think you ever are with Maidenhead. They're not that sort of club, but I think they're going to be relying on Sean McCulsky, in my opinion, for goals next season. and I don't think he's done enough in his whole entire career to show us that he's going to be that man that's going to produce a load of goals for Maidenhead next season. I'm sure that'll be another one that'll be wrong come the end of the season, but at the moment, for me, I'm just not too confident for Maidenhead at all. We'll move on to 22nd then.
For Solihull Moors.
That's a major call, that, to be fair. I'm sure you're going to tell us why you've put them there, because, they're a club that for the past couple of seasons have always been wanting to go for the playoffs. Of course, dropped off last season. Why have you put them in that position?
I don't know for sure, but it appears it's been a massive change in the spending power they've had. I saw the back end of last year, who they let go and who they replaced them with, and it's not got any better in the summer. Get rid of someone as experienced as Neil Ardley just before pre-season starts was a big call. Bringing in a director of football who, may have a little black book of contacts, but is an international footballer and an EFL Premier League footballer, not necessarily is aware of non-league, but may well be. And a brand new manager in Andrew Wing, who's not really got any massive amount of experience. New director of football, new manager, big turnover in the squad, lost Dallas this week to the Football League. I can see them really struggling. They're a bit like Oxford City. Although they've got experience of it as a club being in this league, a lot of the players I'm not convinced have.
Well, I've gone for Kidderminster Harriers then, and they're recently promoted. And it's been the last couple of weeks where I really, sat down and analysed each squad where I've put Kidderminster in this position, because, of course, Kidderminster, they're a big club in non-league. They'd probably see themselves in a few years wanting to be back in the Football League. But I don't look at the size of the club when I do these predictions. I look at the quality in the squad. And I don't think there's enough quality to survive this season, in my opinion. Of course, they finished 6th in the National League North last season, which was just inside of the playoffs. And, of course, whoever gets promoted deserves to get promoted. But throughout the season, they were nowhere near the standard of a Kings Lynn's side last season, or even the ones that they defeated in Brackley last year. Of course, the 7th lowest goal scorers in the National League North. That's not this division, that's the league below as well. And they're going to be relying on the likes of Hemmings to score up top, who only just got into double digits last season in the National League North. Defensively, I think they'll be fine. They were quite strong last season. I think Kings Lynn were the only side to have a better defence than them. But the signings that they've made, when I'm looking at that squad thinking, right, you've been, I wouldn't say fortunate, but throughout the season, you weren't probably good enough to go up. You need to be bringing in players that are going to, bring up the standards to the National League. Christian Oxlade-Chamberlain couldn't even get into Aldershot side. Of course, Jerry McDonough, he's been at so many clubs now. He's been at Halifax, a Scottish Championship side, I believe he's been at, Eastleigh. And he's not set the world alight. Scunthorpe, he's not set the world alight at any of those clubs at all. The only signing that impresses me for Kidderminster, to be honest, is that Jack Lambert in that attacking midfield, right-sided winger role. And I'm just not too impressed with Kidderminster's business, to be honest, and that squad as a whole. I don't think it's a side that's good enough for the National League. That might be another one that comes back to bite me, but on a personal note, I just can't see it, to be honest. And I know a lot of Kidderminster fans will probably try to justify that and say that, no, we're a good enough side to be in this division, but that squad on paper, to me, just doesn't seem good enough, to be honest, after just being promoted. So we'll move on to 21st then. Where have you gone then?
Funny enough, I've gone for Kidderminster.
And guess who I've gone for? Southend.
Oh, there you go. So, I mean, listen, there's an argument that those bottom four that we've sort of chosen could end up in any of those positions. But similar to you with Luke, Kidderminster, a bit like Oxford City, have come up. 6th in the National League North. It's a strong league, but then to jump to National League with not a lot of change or investment in the squad for experience at National League level, I think you're right. Although they've been there before many years ago, I think this could be just their one season and they'll be back down to National League North.
Well, I've gone for Southend then. And of course, you were speaking a lot about that early on, so I'll keep this brief. But the starting 11 on paper is probably a top half starting 11 on its day out. I think a top half, even with the players that they've lost. I think they've lost 3 or 4 players from the previous season that would have got in that starting 11. But honestly, obviously, they can't sign any more players. I think they've got like 15 players in the squad at the moment, and they're not even allowed to add to that. There's talk about them having point deductions in August as well. And they haven't had a proper pre-season. Of course, it's going to take them a few games for the squad to get back up to full fitness. But then even when they do, they'll start picking up injuries. And when then injuries start picking up, it's going to be coming down to youth players starting. And it's going to be a very, very long season for Southend United. I know a lot of their fans, it will just be about having a club come the end of the season. But for me, that squad, when injuries start to come into play and point deductions perhaps, it's going to be a very, very long season for Southend United. I can honestly see them not having the best of starts. And then I think towards the end of the season, they may improve. But I just don't think there's going to be any time for them to add any players. And even if there is a takeover, we saw with Scunthorpe in January, they had the takeover. It still wasn't enough time to get them, secure them safety next season. Oldham had a tough start when they had a takeover. And that this isn't even guaranteed that Southend are going to have a takeover sometime within this season. And for me, unfortunately for Southend, I just can't see them surviving. I know when I've been doing my predictions, I've always really had them just above that relegation zone. But I look at it now and I just think, no, unfortunately for Southend United, to be honest. So 20th place, where have you gone?
Maidenhead.
Maidenhead. Why have you gone for Maidenhead then in 20th?
Well, I think you've just got to go on their past history of hanging in there, finding a gem that does them well for a season, be it a goalkeeper, the centre forward. The fact they've got Dev in charge, Alan Devonshire, who's just incredibly wily at this level. Who's to say that lad from the Championship isn't going to be the one that scores them 20 goals this season and moves on, like you said before. So, but they're always going to be there, down there, with the fact that they're part-time straight hybrid. Their fan base isn't massive, so their budget's not great. They've had some really bad news today from the councils turned around and denied them applications for a new stadium within the town. So, they're going to have to deal with that. They're going to be staying put where they are for the time being. May that affect investment. So I just sort of see them. I think they'll have enough just because of the experience in the league, whereas the likes of Oxford and Kidderminster haven't. And I think, the fact that Solihull and Southend is well known, I think, and Solihull, just with that big change, everything's got to change. Whereas Maidenhead have stayed a bit more consistent. So I think that will just help them.
Well, I've gone for, you're not going to like this at all, but I've gone for Wealdstone. And I'm going to be honest here, I had them in the relegation zone until I proper went into Southend's situation. I had them, and I do think that they're going to struggle this season. I think they are the youngest squad in this division next season. Of course, they've lost the likes of Sam Howes, who's a goalkeeper. Found a replacement. Is he going to be as good as Sam Howes? In my opinion, no. And I think at a club like Wealdstone, that is crucial that you have a proper quality goalkeeper. Of course, I'm sure you'll be able to pronounce this better than me, but Sam Hamburg, something like that. Anyway, he's gone to Woking. So that's a major loss in the defence. Of course, you've signed the likes of Tavon Campbell, but in my opinion, I don't particularly rate him. I think he's a bit hit and miss. And I'm just not too impressed with Wealdstone. I don't think they've done much business. They struggled towards the end of last season quite significantly. And, I think the season ended at the right time for them. Otherwise, they would have finished in a very, very low position last season. They finished 13th. They spent the majority of the season in the top 10. And it was because of that late form why they struggled. When injuries start to kick in as well, I think you're going to struggle. I look at that as a Cook, Kretschmark, these leaders in the side. If any of them get injured, I think you're going to really struggle next season, to be honest, at Wealdstone. You've got a quality manager there, but I just think there's so many quality managers in this division. I would say 22 clubs have got a well-known manager that's quality, in my opinion, this season, that I would rate personally. And when you've got that many quality managers in the division, there's going to be some unsuccessful managers come the end of the season. And of course, I rate Stuart Maynard very highly, but I'm not too impressed with the business so far, to be honest, for Wealdstone. But I have got them to survive. But I could see them going down come the end of the season, to be honest. We'll move on then to 19th place, if I can find it here. Yep. And I've gone for Dorking. Who have you gone for?
I've gone for AFC Fylde.
Very low prediction for them.
Well, again, it's just that the fact that, yes, they've experienced at National League, they've got a good infrastructure, but it is going to be their first season. You see so often how many of these new teams that come up do survive, do compete, but they never sort of really press on and cause bother at the top end of the table. And I think AFC Fylde, if they can survive this season, then they'll only get better because of what they have, because of the infrastructure, because of potentially the money that's there, etc. So that's the reason I don't know too much about them. If I'm brutally honest, Luke, you're going to know more about them than I am. You can talk more about them when you where you choose to put them. But I think any team that's coming up into the National League, respectfully, have to be near that bottom end until they can sort of bed in and push on in a couple of seasons' time.
Well, even to be fair, when you say that, we even saw York, who were a side that I think a lot of people predicted to push on just based off the size of the club. And even them, they finished in, I believe, 19th last season for York. So I do get what you're saying there. But for me, I think with that squad, they're going to finish a little bit higher. But I'll come on to them in a little bit time. But 19th for me, Dorking then. I think a lot of unknown players that they've signed from the lower leagues. I really like the fact that Tony Craig has signed on a permanent basis. They've kept the squad from last season together. There's no major losses apart from Dan Lincoln, but I think they've replaced him with a good goalkeeper in Harrison Mayle there from Worthing. Obviously, Alfie Rusherford is also going to come back this season, I believe. He's been suffering from a lot of injuries. Well, last season he was out for, I think, the majority of the season, got injured. I believe was it Oldham he got injured at last season, and he's a proven goal scorer at this level. But of course, they've got other players like James McShane from last season. But I just think this season, towards the bottom end, it's going to get a lot stronger this season. So I can see them slipping down more. No, Mark was saying he wants to go in the top 3, but I think if you want to get into those playoffs, they need to make a lot more signings than what they have done, not players from the lower leagues who are quite unknown, to be honest, and we don't know what to expect. I just can't see. I know a lot of people have been tipping Dorking to go down, and I can see why. But I do think they'll survive again, but I just can't see any major improvement on last season, to be honest. So I'm going to go for 19th for them, to be honest, which I think most Dorking fans would probably take just being in the National League, to be honest, for another season. And that's where I would probably expect them to be. So I believe we are on to 18th now. I've gone for Aldershot. Who have you gone for?
Aldershot.
We've both gone for Aldershot. Do you want to first then?
Well, I think, and you probably agree with me, Luke, they've recruited. You know, they've gone and got their manager at the back end of last season, Tommy Williamson, who's had National League experience, both getting promoted and relegated with Kings Lynn. I just think their recruitment's just been a little bit sort of hopeful. I think that that what they've got is going to be good enough for the National League, because they're not that proven in National League. Their players, Tommy Widgerington must know, and him and his management team know they're sort of coming from that neck of the woods, aren't they? So, he's relying on players that he knows, but he's got to rely on the fact that they're going to step up to the plate. And they're a very young squad anyway. They've lost Tyler Cordner. It's very well known. I just think they're going to have enough to survive with that manager and with the squad that they have, but they're not going to pull up any trees. And that's why I see him sort of in 18th.
I thought last season Tyler Cordner single-handedly kept Aldershot up, if it comes down to it, with all the stats. If you look at the stats of last season, he was in the top 3 for most defensive starts, the likes of interceptions, most headers, tackles per 90. They relied on him at the back quite heavily. And of course, he is a major loss. I like the fact, I thought they got the ideal replacement in Kristen McHomer. And obviously he's been injured now and he's going to be out. I think for its talks about him being out for the half of the season. So the worst thing possible has happened to them. But I think players like Ryan Glover, I think it's a big year for him. He's a young lad. Showed promise last season, but I think players like him are going to come on. You've mentioned the signings there. A lot of them are coming from Kings Lynn. So the board of Aldershot are clearly putting a lot of trust in the manager. It looks like, anyway, if the signings, they're all signings that feels like it's his players from Kings Lynn and the lower leagues. You know, you've got Jones, a wing-back, Walker, and even his son in Widrington. Obviously, Quanya Thomas as well, very injury-prone himself, but a good striker on his day. At first, I think before when they first started doing the transfers and Tyler Cordner were gone, I instantly thought, Aldershot, you're going to go down this season. But when you think about the squad and you think about the additions, I think they'll have enough to survive. But I think they're one of them. It could go either way. I think they've got a very, very good manager who I highly rate. I think he's quite confident that he can, take this Aldershot side further up the division this season. But I've got to look at it from the squad, in my opinion. And I don't think that squad is going to, fire them up the league, to be honest, any further than what they have been. So I'm going to go for an 18th place finish for Aldershot. I'm going to agree with you on that one.
The other thing with Aldershot is they've got a fan base that are expectant of a team to be near the top than the bottom. And obviously pressure will be placed on Widrington straight away. And if they don't start winning games or competing, then, it's a tough gig for, we saw that with Mark Molesley at the beginning of last year. We saw that when his replacement came in, the lad who was the youth coach. Their fans are expecting them to be nearer the top than the bottom. Whereas, maybe the likes of Fylde, Maidenhead, Wealdstone, the fans aren't expecting that. And that's an added pressure for Widrington and his team.
Yeah. Could you see them going down then this season? I know we've put them in 18th, but could you see, do you think they're going to have enough to survive?
They'll have enough, yeah. There's like, as we predicted, there's 4 or 5 worse teams than Aldershot in this league.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So 17th then, who have you gone for?
I've gone for Ebbsfleet.
I've gone for Solihull Moors. So why have you gone for Ebbsfleet then? It's quite another low prediction, I think, for them. Well, maybe you may say, but
I mean, off the back of them having such a dominant National League South campaign, keeping that squad, and a lot of that squad are of quality. And I think the fact that they're full-time is going to help them. Going into a full-time league, being full-time is going to help any club. They managed to keep the majority of their team, if not all of their squad, including Dominic Polian and Wright and Clifford in midfield. Dennis Kutrieb. The reason I'm putting that a little bit lower is like although they've got quality and although they absolutely not necessarily ran away with National League South, but they were so dominant and National League is still new to them. And it's just how they adapt. They may well be as good as, say, Wealdstone have been in adapting in as much as, from what I've seen, sort of Wealdstone do, and some other clubs in the past, Woking, Maidenhead, Sutton, who've gone through the leagues. So I think it will be one of those where it's a season of consolidation. I don't think they're probably going to be expecting to do anything more than maybe where I put them, 17th, sort of maybe mid-table. But certainly look on paper a really good side to go and watch and a good side to compete in this league.
Well, I've gone for Solihull Moors then. I think another, I'd say fairly low prediction for them, but I see a lot of people are predicting them quite low this season, and it's understandable as well. Dallas departed is a big loss. Of course, last season, throughout the season, the spine of the team were getting torn apart. We saw Barnett obviously left the side, Dallas left. When those two left the side, Solihull Moors were probably performing like a side that were going to get relegated towards the end of the season. And of course, we've heard now about Sabara, and I wish him the best, but he's also had a few illness problems with his heart, medical problems with his heart. And if he's not playing, that's 2 major losses there. And you've also got an unproven manager, and I think that's crucial. He's never managed in this division before. He's a young guy in wing, and I just don't get a good feeling about him at Solihull Moors. I think it's going to go either way. He's either going to be very, very likeable, probably fire them in the top half, and the fans love him, he'll be sacked within the first couple of months, to be honest. And I can just see that happening now with Solihull, to be honest. I like the likes of Hall, who signed from Chorley. Warburton is good if you're going to get a full season out of him. But if he's going to be injured for the entire season, you might as well not have him there, to be honest. And there's other players that have left as well. Corker, Tinsella is obviously gone as well to Barrow. Whelan's gone as well. I'm just not too impressed, to be honest, with Solihull Moors' business. And I'm not a big fan of that manager just from him coming from the lower leagues and obviously the squad that he's lost. But it is a rebuild there. It could be another one where it's going to go either way, where I think they could be a side that will be in the top half and do very well, or they're going to be a side that are going to be down there. And I can see them struggling at the start under Wing and him being the first manager sacked, to be honest. That's just my opinion. It'll probably prove me wrong again, but 13 players in total departed from Solihull Moors this summer. That's a lot of players, which means a lot of new players coming in. And how quickly is that side going to bed in? That's what we're going to see in the upcoming weeks. So 16th place then. Who did you go for?
I've gone for Wealdstone.
Oh, your Wealdstone side. Why have you put Wealdstone in 16th then?
I think they've got enough to compete. It was really important for Stuart Maynard to keep the nucleus of that team together. Yes, I think you're quite right, Luke. They had a bad run towards the end of last season. Now, and I think that was a point of potentially that part-time football catching up with them, not a big squad. Listen, there's no excuses. It's just fact. They're relying on the likes of Jack Cook at the back. They're relying on the likes of Ashley Charles and Dyer in midfield. There was not a lot of rotation able to be done. But obviously having the summer off, recruiting them all again, there's that familiarisation period that doesn't need to be done because they all know each other. They know the manager, they know the setup, the culture. We managed to keep Charlie Barker from Charlton, who'd been on loan at the back end of the season. I think that was a really important signing. Stuart Maynard's proven that he can get the best out of centre forwards that are misfiring. Maybe that's the same for Tavon Campbell. Corey Andrews in pre-season is looking fitter and meaner. Can we get more out of him? My big concern, not so much the goalkeeper now. We've got a goalkeeper that's coming from Bristol City and apparently has got good pedigree. We're still quite light in defence, so I think that could be our Achilles heel. But I certainly think we've got enough to compete, and that's why I've put us where we have. That familiarisation of the league, the players, is going to help them. If we don't start well, though, Luke, I think you're right. The back end of the season could be tough because if we haven't got enough points on the ball and we're scrambling around for points, then we could be a lot lower than that. But I think we've got enough to survive and be in and around that 16th position.
So I know Wealdstone, I think they finished 13th last season. You've put them down 3 places now to 16th. I think that lower end of the division, maybe not losing Notts and Wrexham, I think it's got a lot stronger. But do you think this Wealdstone side's going to be a weaker side than last season? Obviously finishing lower, but obviously I think other sides have improved as well.
No, I think we just got to be realistic that when we sort of went on pockets of runs last year, we'd lose 10 in a row and almost like win 10 in a row type scenario. Mm-hmm. If that doesn't happen this time, then we're going to be lower. If we can be more positive and win more in those clusters, then obviously we'll be higher. But I think the teams around us are getting stronger. Those that have come up. I know we've discussed some that might be weaker than others, but there's a lot of investment in these teams across the league, and that full-time football is important. Just the contact the manager has with players, and it will catch up with us at some point. But I don't think it's going to be this season. But I think it's going to be tough. And Stuart Maynard said exactly the same. It's going to be a tough season. I don't think we're under any illusions. And any Wealdstone fan will say, if we finish 20th, that's good enough for us. We'll compete and finish. I think we'll do more than that, as obviously, but I can't see us going any higher than that 16th place.
Maybe 19th, so you're not on the edge of your seat for the entire season, to be honest. But I've gone for Dagenham and Redbridge, which some may say is quite low, some may agree with. I will admit, at the start, a couple of weeks ago, when I was doing my very, very early draft of predictions, I had Dagenham a lot lower. But I think the business that they've done over the last couple of days has rescued that. Lewis Page has come from Gillingham, well thought of at wing-back. Tom Eastman's come from Colchester at the back. But we have to remember the players that they've lost. Robinson in the midfield's a big loss. Mursagaff, another midfielder. That's 2 key midfielders lost. Mark Vitalio as well. I think for them, he's also departed from the club. There's a lot of players that have left the club, and it is a full season for Ben Strevens now. And he's another manager I think who's quite highly thought of at his time, of course, Eastleigh. But there's a lot of expectations for Dagenham. They're a club that every season always want to be aiming for the playoffs. And there's a mixture of signings there, of course, as well. There's the likes of Josh Rees, who I think did well at Aldershot. I think Boreham Wood liked him, but he's getting on now. And I just can't see him setting a world light at Dagenham. I think what's crucial for Dagenham is they've still got Inny Effingham at the side, up top, who's prolific for them. And that is probably another reason why I've put them in 16th and not a lot lower down. But I can see Dagenham starting off quite slow and improving as the season goes on, to be honest. But there's a few signings there. I don't think they're done yet. I think probably later today we'll hear, as soon as we recorded this, there'll be probably another signing that will come out at Dagenham. And they'll probably put them up a couple of places by then. But 16th for Dagenham, to be honest, that's where I'd be expecting them, which wouldn't be the best of seasons. I think would be classed as an unsuccessful season, but it's better where I had you a couple of weeks ago. So we move on then to 15th. Who have you put in 15th place then?
In 15th, I've put Dagenham.
Oh, so similar prediction.
Similar prediction. And I think for similar reasons, Luke, Ben Strevens is a good young National League manager. I'm surprised it took him as long to get back into management within the National League after his Eastleigh job. He certainly, I know, was someone that would be touted for, say, the Wealdstone job if Maynard was to be leaving. He plays a good brand of football. They're an unknown quantity, aren't they, with Strevens involved from pre-season this season because of that high turnover of players. I could easily have put them a lot lower and maybe a little bit higher because I think you're quite right. They may start off slow and get better. They've got enough experience in their spine of their team. Justin in goal, Effiong up top. There's enough experience in there to suggest that they'll be okay. But I think with that influx of new players and Strevens as a new manager, I think it's a season of consolidation to build on for next season.
Well, I've put Gateshead in 15th, and I wanted to put them higher. They were a club I wanted to put them higher. We saw towards the end of last season how well they were playing and they were picking up results. I think in the form table, they were a playoff candidate if they played like that throughout the season. And a big reason why they didn't was, of course, for injuries. But like we've mentioned, I think this it's getting stronger. And I think Gateshead are getting stronger as well. But I think I want to put them higher, but I just look at the sides above them and I can't really see where I think they're going to be better than them, if that makes sense. The midfield, you've got likes of Booty, Ole, Whelan. That's a very, very strong midfield. Dinanga was becoming prolific for them in that second half of the season when he signed for Gateshead. So I'm really impressed with the signings that they've made. I think at first I had them as like a bit of a dark horse in like the top half of the table pushing for the playoffs. But as other sides in the division have strengthened later on in the transfer window, Gateshead's business is slightly slowed down. And I'm starting to think now they're going to finish a bit lower than I first expected. May as well at the back at goalkeeper. I think he'll be a brilliant addition for them. Did very well for Notts County in that playoff final in the penalty shootout. And I think quite a lot of him. But honestly, for Gateshead, I want to put them higher, but I just can't see where they're going to fit in any higher, to be honest, in the clubs that I've put above them, in my opinion. Who have you put in 14th place then?
14th place? I put Gateshead.
Gateshead. Similar
train of thought, Luke. I think because we obviously talk about this on a weekly basis. Again, back in the last season, FA Trophy run, stability of their squad. Mike Williamson is clearly, cutting his teeth at National League level for the first couple of years, and he's doing really well. I think what's important to Gateshead is that they have a good start. They didn't have a good start to last season. They sort of got better, didn't they? And we all sort of turned around and said they're too good. They play too good a football not to be in this league. and they finally proved that. I think they've got to start the season like they finished last, and there's every chance that's similar to what Wilson have done. They've kept the nucleus of their squad. There's not a big turnover of players. They've gone with what they know. But I think ultimately, as we know, and what we've seen last season, is that the quality is good enough to stay in the league, but not to really bother the top end.
Well, I've put in 14th. I've gone for Fylde, another club that I kind of wanted to put higher. I think Omotayo, it's obviously come into the club, was prolific for Kings Lynn last season. I think Aldershot would have been looking to sign him, but Fylde, they're a club that's got a lot of money behind them, and I think that's something that sometimes gets forgotten about. Obviously, back in the National League now, I think they were a massive shock when they first went down a couple of years ago now, because the season prior to that, they win the playoff final. They were 90 minutes away from the Football League. How quickly it can change within a season. But what they've done since they've come up, they've kept that squad together from last season. I don't think they've used a load of money to a ridiculous amount, to be honest. I don't think they've gone and splashed the cash, to be honest. But they've signed players from the league below, like Kieran Glynn, who did well at Scarborough, the Turkish guy, Jonathan Ustabasi, I think he was at Chorley, and also like Omotayo, like I mentioned. I think Horton was, in the team of the season in National League North last season, and I can see why. I think he got into double digits himself from the attacking midfield position as well. I think he'll do well. And they've got a good back line as well, in the likes of Pierce Bird, who's been at the likes of Kings Lynn and Halifax before. So for me, I think Fylde finished 14th. A lot of people will put them a lot higher, I feel. But I just think first season back in the National League, they haven't signed a load of players, which I think is a good thing. But I just think first season back in this division, I think just consolidate following season. That's where you push on to try and get into those playoff places, where I think Fylde obviously are wanting to go in the near future. So 13th place then. Who have you got in 13th?
I've got a team called FC Halifax
Town.
Oh,
you haven't. I knew that was coming up, but why have you put Halifax in 13th?
They had such an inconsistent season last year, didn't they, Luke? And they ended it pretty well, obviously with their Wembley visit and their win. But again, they've lost some key players this year. Is the recruitment as good? I don't know. I just get a feeling from that they're just going to be steady enough to sort of finish in that mid-table. And listen, they may bother a couple of the top end teams like they did at the back end last year, but I think if they can just get a decent season under their belt with this manager consistently, not periods of time.
The problem is though with Halifax is if we finish 13th, the fans will be on their back, because if you finish 13th, you're gonna have patches where you're not going to play well in the season. You're going to lose quite a lot of matches. And our fan base would just get right on the manager's back. So I just couldn't see that being a good season for Millington, to be honest.
No, and I agree. I don't disagree with you, but I just can't, with the teams that are above them that I put in there, I can't see them being above those teams, if that makes sense. I don't know who you have as 13th and where you got Halifax, but obviously you can talk about more of them when you come to choose where they go.
Well, I've got a side geographically close to Halifax anyway, and that is Rochdale, who've just been relegated from the Football League. First time in the National League, and I think that's crucial. A side that's never been in this division before, been in the Football League for their entire existence. It's probably the lowest of the lows in their entire history as a club. I've been told there's still a few financial issues going on at Rochdale behind the scenes, which isn't good. But I do think overall the business isn't too bad. I think it is very, very mid-table business. Kyle Ferguson did okay at Altrincham. Obviously, Gilmore was average at Halifax, to be honest. I've got strong opinions about him. But I look at the players that they've kept hold of, which I think is quite impressive. And that's the likes of Devante Rodney, Tyrese Sinclair, who was on loan at Altrincham, did well there. But Devante Rodney especially, I know, from his time at Halifax, he was a very, very good player. And Adam Clayton as well, was obviously signed for the club. A very experienced midfielder in the Football League. I think he's come from Bradford. But I don't think they're going to be. I think it'll be a similar sort of season to how Oldham did last season. Started off poor, Justin. Same with Southend a couple of seasons ago. I think they'll struggle at the start, and I think they'll get their act together towards the second half of the season. And I think a 13th place finish for Rochdale will be a bit of a mix between the fan base. But I think when you're first in the National League, you just need a season of a clear season where there's nothing's particularly going too wrong. And then the following season, that's when you start to build on and try aim to get back into that into League Two. So 12th place then, who've you gone for?
Well, I've got a little bit of a dark horse one. I've gone with Dorking.
Ooh, Dorking Wanderers. So Mark White, then I don't know if he'd even be happy with that himself, to be honest, although that's a very high prediction.
I mean, I looked at it and just thought, his exuberance, him talking his team up, they're going full time, I believe. I think they're heading in the right direction. They've got a bit of investment through Mark White or anyone else that he knows. And I just think there could be a team that trouble a few and end up higher than we probably think. I think they've adjusted to the league very well. He soon realised that you couldn't outgun teams last year. If they're going to score 4, we'll score 5. And he changed it. And getting the likes of Craig in is perfect business at the back. Tony Craig's going to know exactly what it takes to stay in the league and maybe push up the league and get into the playoff positions. Not him alone, but he's a really good signing for that example. I just see them just being they're a little bit quirky. The manager's quirky, but they seem to deliver on the pitch. He's got promoted however many times from park football right the way through, and every year they progress, and I can see another year of progression for them. Not necessarily obviously being promoted this year, but they'll be better than last year. So listen, I think they'll do all right and finish in that mid-table position.
So I'm sticking down south with mine in my 12th place finish, and I've gone for Ebbsfleet, which is I think going to be my dark horse of the season. I look at Ebbsfleet, I look at the side, and I think, wow, there's some very, very good players there. I think they're one of those sides in this division that play very, very well as a team. In the FA Cup last season against Halifax, I was very impressed with them. They stormed that division, over 100 points in the National League South. A lot of players in this side that have played in the Football League. And I think that side, without even making any additions, and the one significant loss who's gone to the Football League, I think that side would have survived comfortably anyway. But to add to that side of the likes of Cisse from Eastleigh, and who was obviously old, and I know people have a lot of bad opinions on him, but he's been in the Football League. He's a tall midfielder that offers you something different. Hayden White's at the side. Jack Wakely's obviously come on loan. I know Gabriel Sutton, he said a lot about Hayden White and how good of a footballer he is, and I can see why he's predicted him as a dark horse. The likes of Toby Edzo as well, who's been at the side before, in the National League before, with Aldershot, well thought of. Very, very impressed with the German manager. I'm not going to try to pronounce his name, but everyone knows who I mean. And they're just a very good footballing side who have that dark art about them, the dark arts of the game as well about them, where they'll hoof it in the air, they'll foul if they need to foul, and I'm just very impressed with Ebbsfleet, and I could see them finishing even higher, to be honest, than that prediction. But I haven't even mentioned Pauline yet, who scored 38 goals last season, and I know he's been in the higher tiers of English football, but someone who scores 38 goals in the league below, I know there's all this about them not being unproven at this level, but I can't see him not scoring a lot of goals for Ebbsfleet this season unless he gets injured. So, I think Ebbsfleet will have a very, very good season, in my opinion. And I think a 12th place finish will be a good season for Ebbsfleet. I think their fans will be happy with that. So, 12th for Ebbsfleet. We'll move on to 11th place now. Who have you gone for?
I've gone for Rochdale.
Rochdale.
I think similar to what you said, Luke, first season in the National League ever. They've gone about their business quietly. Their fan base haven't been all over social media saying we're going to piss the league and this, that, and the other. They're respecting the league. But I think you're right. Teams that come down are always going to be shot at by teams that are already in the league. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute they're going to go and play as if it's their cup final, but you imagine the likes of Wealdstone, Dorking, Oxford, maybe even someone like Halifax. getting a result
against enemies, aren't they? So yeah.
But turning around saying we beat Rochdale, who were in the Football League last year. Teams will up their game naturally against teams like Rochdale, like Hartlepool, like Wrexham were last year. They naturally will play. The fans will be up there. There'll be more fans there. So I think Rochdale will find that, like you said, they'll find that difficult just to adjust to the league, a bit like Oldham did last year. And it's a season of consolidation, and then maybe they push on to playoffs next season. But I certainly don't see them doing what Scunthorpe did. I certainly don't see them being down near the bottom this year. But they may surprise us. But I think that season of consolidation, finding their feet, and they'll finish in 11th place.
So I've gone in 11th. I've gone for Altrincham, and it's been a big turnover for them this season. It's been a very positive window. I know a lot of people have got them as the dark horse. I think for Altrincham, it's just right to put them in 11th. 8 new players, well, I think 9 new players have come in at this moment in time now. Very impressed with all of those signings. One major loss that I think they had no say on losing this player, and that's Josh Lundstrom. He's obviously gone to Oldham. They've lost the likes of Jordan Hume, who's I think was a bit more of a mutual decision to lose him. But it's a massive turnover, and I think there's a big reason behind that. Altrincham have obviously gone into that full-time module last season, and this is the second season they're doing that now. And I think last season it was about adjusting to full-time. This season it is about kicking on, and I think they're going to kick on a few places. We saw in that second half of the season, Altrincham were like a different team compared to the side that Halifax played on Boxing Day to the side that they played in the FA Trophy. It was like a different team, to be honest. And yes, there's a few players who will not be playing who played last season, like Oyeleke, Hugh Gill, another player, Sinclair, have all gone back to the parent clubs. But the business that they've done is very impressive. Con Clark, that is an amazing signing, in my opinion. Him on loan last season was one of the standout players when he came on loan. And then obviously went on loan to a side in Ireland after his parent club loaned him out at Fleetwood. And then obviously for Altrincham to then sign him is very, very good business. Other players as well that they've signed. There's a lot of quality players that they've signed. Altrincham, Donowa being one. Justin Amaluza's got a lot to prove, showed promise at Aldershot. Joey Jones offers a lot of experience. He was at Solihull. And then the players that they've returned, like some Isaac Marriott, young player that I think is going to kick on even more this season as well. Coslow was injured for the entire of last season. On his day, he's a quality player in this division. One of the best when he's fully fit. He's very inconsistent. But if he can stay consistent, I can see him being a star for Altrincham next season. But yeah, just think with the amount of players that have departed and the amount of players that have come in, it's going to take time for them to bed in. So I think 11th place finish for Altrincham, in my opinion, is just right. We'll move on to 10th then. Who have you got in 10th place?
York City. I would have had them a lot lower a couple of weeks ago. I think Ugler, who's in charge there, has been more sensible in his recruitment than he probably was with Yeovil. Although it started off similar to Yeovil, that very much scattergun approach, let's get players in, didn't seem to be an awful lot of quality. But in the last, having brought in Cordner and then brought in a lad from Wimbledon just this week, his name escapes me, the captain of Woodyard, they're proven players at this level or higher. My worry with York, and that's why I've only put them in 10th, is actually their squad good enough? Their first 11 maybe, but will their squad be good enough? And it's tempered by the fact that this owner has previous at Yeovil of maybe meddling in the team affairs, picking the team. How much will he give Morton the chance? Who's picking? All these questions will be raised in my head. In as much as long as he lets the management get on with it, supplies the finances, and let managers pick the team and pick the players, they could even finish higher. But I just think that probably won't happen, and there could be issues throughout the season for York, and hence why I sort of temper that by putting them in 10th place.
I think we've got to the point now where there's 10 clubs now. Maybe one of mine that's going to be a bit biased because obviously Halifax haven't mentioned yet. But these 10 clubs, or even maybe you could include the likes of Altrinchams and maybe your Files, who we've put quite low, both of us, I feel, in this list. These sides now will all be saying if you don't put a certain side in the playoffs now, their fan base will be disappointed that they haven't, because it's the point where it's going to be proper tight between 10th and 7th. Last season, there was about 4 points in it between 10th and 7th. So it's very, very hard to call. But I've gone for quite a low finish for this club. Had a terrific year last season. Came up short in the playoffs, and that is Barnet. And a lot of people say that's quite low. But I felt they overachieved last season. They were quite a small squad. That seemed to show towards the last couple of games last season, and especially in the playoffs. Dean Brennan's obviously learned from that. I think, well, it's not a case of learning from it. I think he's had more resources this season to add more depth to that. Ben Corker's come in. Hall Johnson's come in. Of course, from Wrexham, 2 wing-backs there. But they've lost a few players as well. Ryan de Havilland's gone to Peterborough. Smith's gone to his parent club. There's players that have left the club, and obviously it's finding replacements for those players. Zach Brunt, I think, is a good replacement. But the question is, did Barnet overachieve last season? Because I think that they're going to get found out this season, unfortunately for them. I think they're still a good side, but I think teams are going to start to find out Barnet, and I don't think they've added any significant amount of quality to the squad from last season. Zach Brunt to Ryan de Havilland, I think, offers something different to him. But there's no one that's coming and I think is going to add a major amount of quality to what they had last season. And I think this season you have to be stronger than last season to get in the playoffs, unfortunately. So Barnet, I've put them in 10th, which might be a little controversial, but that's where I've placed them, to be honest. 9th place then, who have you gone for?
I've gone with Bromley. And I think what you sort of talk about Barnet is how I see Bromley being. I don't think they're going to be as strong as they were last year. I think teams will find them out. They've lost some key players, haven't they? And look, Andy Woodman, he rubs people up the wrong way with his sort of abrasive attitude on the sideline, but he's a very canny manager. He uses and relies on youth a lot, and I think that's very, very commendable. But I think teams are going to find them out, and I just don't think they've got enough in their squad and in their recruitment that's sort of allows them to push on, because they're always in and there or thereabouts, aren't they? They're always sort of 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, always seem to do well in cup matches, which may be detrimental to them. I mean, how much the losing the playoff semi-final last year will affect them, I don't know. But I just can't see him being as strong as last year, and that's why I put him in 9th.
So for my 9th, I've gone for Halifax. And this is probably the prediction that's going to get a lot of stick, because obviously I'm a Halifax fan. A lot of people have put them probably anywhere from this to like lower mid-table. And obviously I know more about Halifax. It's like Paul with Wealdstone. I put Wealdstone in 20th. He put them in 16th. He knows more about them. And I think it's the same with Halifax. I know, proper in-depth analysis, I think, from just, being a massive supporter of the club. We've lost Deborah, we've lost Gilmore, we've lost Senior, we've lost Manny, and we've lost Spence. Gilmore, not too much of a loss, to be honest. I think easily replaceable, and I think we have done that. Deborah, yes, is a big loss, but was injured actually for the last 10 or so games last season when we really did peak. And that's when we were obviously beating the likes of Wrexham, winning the FA Trophy, battering the likes of Maidstone and York. He was actually injured during that time. Senior, yes, I think it's a big loss at wing-back, but I think wing-back's quite an easy position to replace, if there was ever an easy position to replace. Manny was actually in and out of the team because Harker was keeping him out, and Spence was non-existent for probably half of last season, to be honest. So with the replacements we've made and how well we ended last season, I can really see us kicking on now. I want to actually put us higher, but I know that a lot of people would disagree with that if I put them in the playoffs. And I don't think there's enough there to justify us putting us in the playoffs. But I do really feel that we can kick on even further now and maybe get into those playoffs this season. But 9th place for Halifax at the moment, yes, might be a bit biased, but that's where I'm placing them. I think the signings we've made, like Adam Senior, retaining him, who was crucial last season towards the back end of the season. Hottie's obviously coming from Tranmere, looks a good midfielder. Galvin, the senior replacement. And based off pre-season, I've been quite impressed and I'm quite optimistic that we can do well this season. So, yeah, 9th place finish for Halifax. 8th place then, who have you gone for?
I've gone with Woking.
That is very, very... That's going to get a lot of stick, I can guarantee you that.
Well, these are one of my next 3 I could have put in any sort of order of those 3. I just think, yes, they've signed Robertson, quality footballer from Dagenham and Redbridge, one of my favourite National League footballers. I'd love to see him in a Wealdstone shirt, being biased. I was hoping that they might try and nab him, but being part-time with his music career sort of going on. But listen, they've got a brilliant manager in Darren Suttle. They know exactly what it takes to be in and around those playoffs. But I just think that there's 7 teams higher than them that will be better and get more points. Simply as that. I can't think of any other reason. That they're just a very, very good, very solid, very dependable, efficient National League team. But so are all those top 7 or 8. And I just, there's they could be higher than I've settled on them being 8th.
I think they've had one major loss, haven't they? And in James Daly, he seems to be that big loss, hasn't he? And I think they have replaced him, so that's probably why I'd put them a bit higher. But for me, 8th, who was it that I put now there? Bromley, that was it. So you put them 9th, I put them 8th. I just don't, like you've mentioned, I don't think they've strengthened too much from last season. They've had a bit of a like for like replacement in losing Omar Sawomye and then bringing in Kapekawa. Is he going to live up to the boots of Omar Sawomye? I think in time, yes, he could. But of course, Harry Forster's left the side from wing back, more an attacking wing back style of player. And they've just not been very busy, have they, in the transfer window? They've retained that squad from last season. But like I've mentioned with Barnet, the sides around them are getting a lot stronger. And I think when you look at the likes of York improving, even the Halifaxes, Hartlepool have come into the division now. I can just see them slipping outside of the playoffs, unfortunately. And that's why I've put Bromley in 8th place. We can more or less guarantee that they're going to be in the top half. They're always somewhere around there, but it's just where do you put them? Do you put them in the playoffs or do you put them just short? And I think both of us have both agreed that they're not probably going to be good enough to get into the playoffs this season. So 7th place then, who have you gone for?
This is definitely my dark horse. I've gone with Altrincham.
Altrincham in 7th.
Yeah, I think similar to what you said earlier, Luke, about Altrincham. I know you had them in 11th, but yes, last year was a big changeover from going from part-time to full-time. This season, it's going from who you've got full-time to improving the squad. And there's no point going over old ground, but the signings they have made with what they've been able to keep, with the brand of football they play, with the type of club they are in, as much as they're very set, they seem very settled on and off the football pitch, and they're just heading in the right direction. I think this season they'll show more consistency than they did last year, purely because they've done that season of transition, and I think this season is when they'll push on, and I can just see them being the sort of the dark horse in the playoffs.
There's always one, isn't there? There's always one side.
Is.
So there's always Halifax a couple of seasons ago. Last season were Barnet. There's a side that kind of comes out of nowhere, and I see what you mean with Altrincham. I wanted to put them higher, but I felt I wouldn't say sensible, because I don't think you've been not sensible there, but it's quite a bold prediction. But I think you've justified it quite well.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because you look at, like I said, you look at Bromley, Woking, Altrincham, and who my 6th team will be, and we'll get on to that. You could have an argument to put them in any order in those 4. So, yeah, I think Altrincham will just show a better level of consistency, and because of that, they'll push on and get in the playoffs.
Now, I've gone for the club that you hate the most in this division. Well, the owner at the moment, and that is York City. And honestly, they were a side that I was putting a lot lower a couple of weeks ago. They were the side that I put in the relegation zone when I first drafted predictions before the takeover happened. As soon as the takeover happened, I think I had them like 12th or 11th when they made 1 or 2 signs, even when they'd signed Cordner and Howe. defensively, I think York are probably on paper have got the best defence in the division. Howe is one of the best centre-halves in this division, and Cordner is the best centre-half. That's how I'd put it, to be honest. But I always felt like going forward, were they strong enough? Have they signed enough players? And I wouldn't go overboard, but I think they've added to it. Akinyemi, I think, although he scored a lot of goals in the Scottish Championship, I believe, he's unproven still at this level. I can't really tell you how you compare the Scottish Championship, the second tier of Scotland, with the National League. I think it's there'll probably be a massive mix between clubs in that division. I think when Dundee win there, we're probably a League Two side, and then you've got other sides in there that are probably National League North and South standard. So
yeah, you're right.
I can't really comment on the difference in quality between that, but you'd like to think that he'll take that ability, he'll take those goals into this York side. Castro, very, very inconsistent, can produce some very good moments. And until yesterday, when Woodyard had signed, I had them just outside of the playoffs. I think I had them in 8th. But now Woodyard had signed, I've always said they need a better midfielder. They've found that now. I think York will probably sneak in. I think it's going to take them time to gel as a side. They might start the season slow, but I think once they, really play the best of their ability as a side and gel as a side, I think York will probably sneak into these playoffs, to be honest, because that is, of course, the expectation for this season. 6th place, then. Who have you gone for?
I've gone for the perennial playoff positions there or thereabouts from Boreham Wood.
Boreham Wood. Always around there, aren't they?
Always around there. Luke Garrard is a very, very good manager, plays a brand of football that he has sent. I'm not suggesting he parks a bus, but they are very, very, very difficult to beat. Very difficult to beat. And he always seems to produce a bit of attacking flair that gets some goals and wins and matches. And you're always going to do well if you set up not to lose and then you try and nick a goal here and there and win. You're always going to do well. And I think that's how Luke Garrard plays. He's very pragmatic in his approach. He's gone for proven National League quality in the players he's signed and Football League quality. And I just think that, again, they'll be there or thereabouts. And the one thing about Boreham Wood is, I feel sorry for the fact that they don't get more supporters watching them. They're not great to watch. I appreciate that, but there's more than one way to win a football match, and Boreham would find a way to win a football match in their style.
That's not us taking the mick, by the way. That's just basically meaning that we look at sides like Dorking, who get good attendances, considering where they've come from. Boreham Wood always seem to struggle, don't they?
Boreham Wood struggle. They deserve a better fan base. They deserve more. And Danny Hunter, the owner there, has done everything he can to try and get people through the door. But listen, they're a good, solid, a bit like Woking, a bit like Bromley. Those are the sorts of teams. That's what I say. Boreham Wood, Orchard, Woking, and Bromley. I could have put them in any particular order of those four. I just think Boreham Wood have kept the nucleus squad. They haven't lost players like Bromley have. They've maybe recruited better than Woking. They're more consistent than Altrincham, hence why they're actually in the top 6.
Well, I've gone for the monkey hangers then at Hartlepool United, just down in this division. I know I always like to think that sides who come down struggle, which they always seem to do. But we look at the likes of Grimsby, who came down. They knew this division from the back of the hand. And I think it's a similar situation with Hartlepool. The signings that they've made, they've respected the division. Diasaruwe coming in. Yes, there's different opinions, right? Some Halifax fans were saying that he was a lump up top. I think he had a bit more than just his height, to be honest. Then you've also got Weyer, who's also coming to the side from Southend, which I think is a good addition. Sterry's still there. Umrah, obviously still there. He scored a lot of goals for them last season. And most of all, they've got a very, very good manager who knows how to get out of this division in John Askey. Macclesfield managed to get promoted with them. And when he was at York as well, he managed to get them out the National League North the playoffs. And I can see Hartlepool being one of those sides that just finish inside of the playoffs and then having a very, very good playoff campaign. I think they know this division. Yes, there's not many remaining players from that side that got promoted, especially with Featherstone announcing that he's leaving this afternoon. But I just think there's a lot of quality still in that side. I think they'll be well managed. They'll play well as a team. They'll gel well. And I think they're just going to be a tough side to beat, to be honest, next season. So, yeah, I think 6th place for Hartlepool at the moment. Got a lot of firepower up top too. 5th place then, who have you put in 5th?
Hartlepool.
Hartlepool.
for very much the reason you just said, Luke. You know, Rochdale have come down into this league, don't know the league, you know, and there's a needed season of adjustment, and we see that with a lot of teams. I think the fact Hartlepool were only here 2 or 3 years ago, they know the league, they respect it. They did very well when they got promoted from it the last time round. Hence why I think they'll do okay, because they're just, you know, maybe some of the off-field trouble. I think there was something posted today that they've tried to delay the post of their accounts, but I think they're very settled with who they have on and off the field in terms of management and players. And like you said, I think they're going to be just strong, very strong, but still not in the top 3 or 4. I've put them 5th.
Well, in my 5th place, I've gone for Eastleigh, and obviously you've got above them. I think there'll be Chesterfield, Oldham, couple of, who are the other 2? There's also Boreham
and Woking.
They're my 4 teams, and that is not the order that I'm putting them in, by the way. You'll see in a second what order I put them in. But of course, I've put East. I was comparing mostly, all their squads and thinking, where do I place these? How do I compare these squads? And I wanted to put Eastleigh higher, but they're another club. They've had a lot of new players that are coming into the side. So it's going to take them time to gel. But these players are quality players that I never thought Eastleigh could attract. And it is probably because of Stuart Donald returning to the club why they're bringing in players like this. McCallum returning, that'll be a good signing, in my opinion. I can't see that going wrong, to be honest. I think we'll score a lot of goals for them. Enzo Baldwin as well was at Notts County, did very, very well there. Then got a move into the EFL at Sutton. And then has obviously then come to Eastleigh. I think he'll do well. You've also got the players like Charlie Carter, who were there last season, got better as the season went on. So how it should work is that it gets even better this season. And defensively, they always seem to be quite good. They've got one of the best goalkeepers in the division in McDonnell. I think, the likes of Maguire coming in the attacking midfield role, clamping at wing back from the Football League. I think Eastleigh will do well this season. I think a respectable 5th place finish. Last season especially, just outside of the playoffs. I think now they'll want to kick on and get into those playoff places. We'll move on to 4th then. Who have you put in 4th place?
I've got Barnet in 4th place.
Barnet in 4th.
And I think it's probably the team that we're going to disagree about the most in terms of where we see them, Luke. I mean, I think last year they were the most improved team in the National League from the years before. They definitely got stronger. And I genuinely think the signings that they've made have made their squad strong, because I think there was one criticism speaking to Barnet fans of their team was they had a good team but not a strong squad. And I think Brennan has addressed that, and he's now got a good nucleus of 18 players rather than maybe 11, 12, 13. He's kept most of them, and they finished the season relatively well. And I think they're going to go back in and do that again. It pains me to say it, being a Wealdstone fan, but I genuinely think Barnet will be up there and be in the 4th position. The one sort of fly in the ointment, maybe, that they've lost John Dreyer, who was the assistant manager. He's gone to Burton Albion with Dino Marmaria. He was a defensive coach. Knowing Dean Brennan as I do from watching him, his Wealdstone teams and other teams, very much an attacking type of coach, manager, philosophy. You score 4, we'll score 5, that type of scenario. Yeah. Whether that sneaks back in because they've got rid of Dreyer's left, that may be the thing that pulls them down. But I genuinely believe that they've got a very, very strong squad, quite settled, and a team that wants to play for that club, which I don't think they've had over the last few years. So I can see them really troubling that top 7 and finishing 4th.
In my 4th place, then I've gone for Boreham Wood, and I think the business this summer has been very, very impressive. A step up from recent years, to be honest. I'm getting to the point now where I'm struggling to put Tyrone Marsh in the starting 11 of Boreham Wood. And a couple of seasons ago, he was one of the best wide players, and I think still is on his day in this division. Of course, Sagaf's come from Dagenham. He's come from there. Very good midfielder. You've also got likes of Whelan there, the likes of Jack Paynes at the club. And even the forward line. I look at Unlove from last season. Got better as the season went on, started bringing more goals to his game as the season went on. And I think this season he'll score even more for Boreham Wood. I think he's a powerful striker that's just going to score more and more goals. Appiah as well, I think it is. He's come into the club, 32 years of age, a proven goal scorer at this level and above. And then you've also got lots of the likes of Sosa. Sosa, I think it is. When he was at Grimsby, I thought highly of him. He just lacked end product. I think it was the same last season. And I think he'll do well again. Defensively, wherever Bournemouth would finish, defensively, they'll be very, very good. And I think they still will be. But the difference between this season that's coming now compared to last season, and why I've put them a couple of places higher, is the fact that I think they're not just going to be proper good defensively this season. Going forward, I think with the likes of Appiah, Unlove, Marsh, Sousa, defensively and going forward for him as well, and the likes of Sagaf and Payne coming in, I think Boreham Wood will be up there next season again. And I think going forward, they're going to step it up a gear next season. So that's why I put Boreham Wood in 4th place. 3rd place then?
Eastleigh.
So they're a side that I think most people are thinking in and around the playoffs. And I was considering putting them in the top 3. But at the end of the day, I looked at the squad and thought probably just misses out on that top 3. Why have you put them there?
I think with Eastleigh is they just go about their business very quietly. No one seems to talk about them. They don't seem to ruffle any feathers. They're not big time. A little bit like sort of how Boreham Wood are. They're quite pragmatic. They get on and do it. They've got good experience throughout their team. They've got good experience as a club being in the National League. Having Stuart Donald back is a massive thing for them. I think that's what has made me put them up there, because what you've also got to see, look at who they've signed, and you talked about who they've already recruited. And they've got probably the potential to improve on that if they need to throughout the season. Mm-hmm. And if they start strongly, they'll recruit stronger. And I think they've always shown a good level of consistency. And that's what's needed in any league, especially in the National League, is you can't have those inconsistent periods. Halifax have been through it. Wealdstone, we've seen teams that have been through it, and you don't sort of cause any bother to that top end because of it. So I think Eastleigh are just hugely consistent, and they will just be hugely better than they were last year. And with Stuart Donald involved, I can see them, being in that top 3.
That might be classed as a dark horse, that, with Eastleigh, to be fair, but I can actually see why. And a couple of days ago, I had them in that position, but I was just comparing squads, and I just think Woking, who I've put in 3rd place, will just be a little bit stronger just on paper with a squad. And it is on paper. A lot can change with injuries throughout the season, but Woking have kept that squad together. They've had one big loss in Daly, who's gone to Harrogate. That's one big loss compared to even the likes of Eastleigh, who, a lot of players have left the club. Danny Whitehall's obviously left the club. A couple of other players that I can't think of off the top of my head as well. Harper, he's gone to the Football League as well. And yes, you've probably got players that can do it equally as well or offer something different, but it also takes time to gel in. Woking, they've kept the squad together, apart from obviously Daly, and then added to it Matt Robinson, like you've mentioned, he's one of the best midfielders in this division, was probably the standout player, I thought, for Dagenham last season. Reece Brown was prolific for Woking last season. I think he will be again this season. Oyeleke did very well for Chesterfield, but obviously we know Chesterfield is getting stronger and stronger, and obviously he's moved to Woking instead of going back to Chesterfield again. And there's other players like Nene Boating, Greg Taylor, both come from the Football League. And I just think this Woking side, it looks a very, very strong side on paper. Again, more depth as well than last season. So I think with the likes of Notts and Wrexham gone now from the division, I think they can push on and get into those top 3. I think there's more of an opportunity now for them to get into those top 3 this season. But they are a side that where I can see why you've put them outside of the playoffs, where obviously we've backed my Barnet decision prediction as well. I put it is the case of, was it a one-off season? Are they going to do that again? And I think your Workings, your Barnets, because it was the first time last season that they broke into the top 7 in a number of years, there's the questions going around now is, are they going to be able to do it again? And I'm expecting Woking to be able to do it again and maintain those standards and push on next season. Moving on to second and first then. So second place, I have a feeling we're going to agree on these next 2. We'll both say at the same time. Second place is Oldham.
Oldham.
Yeah. We've both agreed on that one.
And obviously top will be Chesterfield, yeah.
Yeah, top will be Chester. We'll come on to them in a second, but Oldham second place. Why have you placed them there?
They've done their season in the National League. They've realised how difficult it is. They've soon realised to sort of wind their necks in a little bit and just get on with it. And, they're going to go into pre-season with a settled manager in David Unsworth. They've got an owner who seems quite infectious and has given a real good buzz around the place. And clearly on the field, he's trimmed his squad. He's kept who he wants. He's improved on it. And I think just the magnitude of the football club, their fan base, the everything they have lends themselves to getting back in the Football League. I'm not saying they will, because if they finish second, they've got to go through the playoffs like everyone else. But I think there's going to be hard push for a lot of teams to beat them and finish above them in the league.
Well, like we've both agreed on that one. So if we remember Oldham that second half of the season, they were a different team. I think they would have finished in the playoffs if it was just the second half of the season. And they've kept the squad together from last season. I don't think they've actually lost anyone that was regularly in that starting 11. And a bit like your Workings, apart from Daly and Boreham Woods and Chesterfields even, they've kept the squad together from last season and then just added to it with even more quality. And I think you look at Oldham, the signings that they've made, Dan Ward in the midfield, Josh Lundstrom, I think for those 2, it's going to be a big season for those 2. And you've got the likes of Alex Reid, who's still at the club up top. Yes, Fondop's still up top as well for them. And on his day, he's a good striker. I do agree with that. On his day, he's a good striker as well. Hobson defensively. It's just come into place, this Oldham squad now. They've got a proper spine about them, which they didn't have for the first half of last season. They've got rid of that deadwood now. Everyone seems to coming around to Unsworth and him being quite likeable at Oldham as well now. So I think Oldham will have a good season. I think a second place finish for them would be a very, very good season for Oldham. But I just don't think they have enough to really push on to really compete with this Chesterfield side, to be honest. I just think they're lacking something there, particularly going forward compared to Chesterfield, that I just think is what's going to be the reason why Oldham do come up short in the end. So first place then, we've both agreed on Chesterfield. They are going to be our champions. Best of the rest from last season. I think they are the favourites from the odds. Yes, it might be a bit boring and a bit obvious that we put them there. But to be honest, for me, I don't think if you're going to be sensible about doing predictions, to be honest, I think you've got to put them in this position because they were best from the rest last season and they've kept that squad together and then just added to it with ridiculous players from League One Championship sides.
Listen, it can't be lost on anybody that on the day they were better than Notts County in the playoff final. Yeah, everyone liked and wanted Notts County to go up because they'd had a good season. Over the season. But on the day, Chesterfield were better than Notts County and different circumstances where they probably would have won and been in the Football League. So you can't lose sight of that fact. And they've kept that squad. And like you said, getting the likes of Will Grigg in up top is a ridiculous statement of intent to try and win this league. And, they stuck with Paul Cook. Paul Cook easily could have been sacked at any point last season before they went on that run towards the end. They kept with him and, he changed that team. He brought the likes of Dallas in on loan and sort of improved improved. And like you said, Luke, they were the best of the rest. Now Wrexham and Notts have gone. Apart from maybe Oldham, I can't see anyone getting closer to them being champions. And that's just how it is going to be this season. I'll be very, very surprised if it's anybody else.
Well, I think if it was anybody else, then I think most people, it's not a case of you're looking silly putting Chesterfield top. It's just fairly obvious. On paper, this is Chesterfield's time. They should win if they don't win the league, it's an unsuccessful season, unless they obviously get promoted through the playoffs. But even still, it's theirs to lose, I think. Everyone thinks Chesterfield are going to win the title. On paper, they should. Naylor, Will Grigg, players like that. Naylor played 30-odd times in the Championship. I think 36 in total for Wigan last season. Will Grigg scored 25 goals in League One about 3 or 4 years ago and scored against Manchester City. Those two signings are just marquee signings and ridiculous signings. I think, is it Hobson as well at the back they've signed as well? Defensively, Harry Tyra was in the team for the season for Chester last season. And I think when you think of goalkeepers, there ain't much difference between the league below and this league in terms of goalkeepers. He obviously was at Everton. They've signed him back. It's a ridiculous team on paper that would do very well in League Two, in my opinion. And like we mentioned, they were best of the rest from last season. They gave Notts County a good game on the day. Like you've mentioned, were the better side. And they've still got lots of Dobra, Colclough still in the side, Oddlaker as well, and a very, very good manager in Paul Cook. So I think for Chesterfield, it certainly is theirs to lose. There's no reason with that squad why they shouldn't win the league this season. The only slight concern is Will Grigg going to be prolific because he hasn't been for the last couple of seasons. In my opinion, I still think he's going to score enough goals to get Chesterfield back into the Football League. And even if he doesn't, they've got other options, Chesterfield. So, yeah, I think Chesterfield next season, they are my champions. And Paul has agreed with me on that. Paul, that wraps up our National League predictions. Thank you for joining me and putting yourself out there to do these and opening yourself up to probably a bit of criticism in the comments. But no, I've enjoyed it over the past hour, half or so, recording these with you and learning a bit about your predictions as well.
No, thank you very much for letting me do it, Luke. It was, I could have spent hours on it. I'm happy with what I've settled with, and I can certainly see where you put your teams. And anyone who has an opinion, there's an argument to put most teams in different positions in the league. They're not going to be extremely different to maybe what we've got, but those that know their teams better will maybe place them higher. But we can only go on what we know and what we've seen being signed and how they're doing in pre-season. But I'm quite happy in my league, and we'll see how we get on throughout it, and maybe we'll reflect on it at the end of the season.
We certainly will. Yeah, thank you for joining me once again, Paul, and thank you to everyone that has watched our predictions video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Please remember to like and subscribe. Like I mentioned at the start, this will most likely be the first time that a lot of people will be watching, with it being quite a popular video, as it is on most channels. So please consider subscribing to the channel. This is the best place for National League, well, the only place on YouTube for regular National League coverage. Once again, Paul, thank you for joining me.
No problem.
And until next time, bye for now.